Jason Ghost Harris and Aisha Shade Malik ran Birmingham's darkest streets with ruthless precision, but no one knew the real kingpin pulling their strings. For years, this invisible empire thrived without a single phone call or digital trace, until a silent police operation uncovered secrets that would shock the entire city. In the heart of Birmingham, something didn't sit right with the residents of certain neighborhoods. Streets that once echoed with music, arguments, and daily chatter had grown eerily quiet. Crime rates appeared to be dropping, at least on paper. There were fewer reported shootings, fewer police chases, and barely any visible signs of drug activity. Yet those who lived there knew something was wrong. Local shopkeepers noticed unfamiliar faces who never spoke, just watched. Taxi drivers refused to go down certain roads after dark, and some families suddenly left town without a word. The police had nothing to go on. There were no known gang names, no graffiti tags, no threatening videos on social media. Everything that defined traditional street gangs was absent. But whispers spread about a group controlling everything behind the scenes: drugs, money, even who could speak and who had to stay quiet. It was said that once you were in their debt, you had two choices: pay or disappear, and people did disappear. Young men who once loitered on corners vanished overnight. No arrests, no funerals, just silence. Investigators unofficially referred to the group as the Quiet Syndicate, though no one could confirm it even existed. There were no phone records, no drug busts, and no known suspects. But patterns began to emerge. Drug overdoses increased in clusters, but never in the same neighborhood twice. Schools near these areas started reporting drops in attendance. Social workers stopped showing up at certain houses. And every few weeks, a new luxury car was spotted parked outside a modest home, usually for no more than a day. It was as if an invisible hand was managing everything, keeping crime too low to attract serious police attention, but high enough to keep control. People in the community began to live under a new kind of fear. It wasn't the fear of being shot or robbed. It was the fear of being watched, judged, and dealt with in ways no one ever saw coming. No one complained. No one reported suspicious activity. If the bins were collected late, nobody called the council. If the electricity went out, people waited quietly, because everyone knew, even if they didn't say it, someone was in control, and that someone didn't like noise. It was this quiet domination, this strange calm in the midst of criminal chaos, that made law enforcement finally take a closer look. What they were about to uncover wouldn't just shake a few neighborhoods, it would rattle the entire city. What made the gang so dangerous wasn't just the drugs they sold. It was how invisible they were while doing it. Most criminal groups left some kind of trail. Phone calls, social media posts, intercepted messages, or even careless spending would eventually give them away. But this group operated like ghosts. There were no texts, no phone records, and no direct communication between members. Even street-level dealers had no idea who was at the top. Every person only knew what they needed to know, and nothing more. The police couldn't follow the money because it was moved in the most unexpected ways. Cash wasn't just stored, it was laundered through dozens of small businesses spread across the city. Some of them were real, with staff and customers, while others were just empty buildings with lights left on. On paper, they all looked like modest operations: a car wash here, a laundromat there, a few convenience stores, and some late-night takeaways. But behind the scenes, money flowed through them like rivers underground, completely untraceable. One corner shop in Handsworth reported profits 4 times higher than the average for similar stores, yet had no CCTV, no employees registered, and no receipts for inventory. A mobile barber shop that only opened on weekends somehow afforded 2 brand-new vehicles. A nail salon in Sparkhill, which had no visible customers for weeks, was found to be paying rent in cash, several £1,000s at a time. Every time authorities tried to investigate, records were clean, taxes were paid, and the businesses were lawyered up before a single question could be asked. They weren't flashy either. No Instagram posts, no music videos flaunting money, and no luxury penthouses. Everything was subtle. Instead of stacking cash in shoeboxes, they invested in things that wouldn't attract attention: storage units, delivery vans, and private parking lots. Their vehicles were always registered under legitimate companies, and the drugs were transported in fake maintenance trucks with company logos printed professionally. When large amounts of cash needed to be moved, they didn't use banks. Instead, they used trusted individuals, usually people with no criminal history, to carry the money by hand, sometimes disguised as food delivery workers or even charity collectors. Some were elderly, some were teenagers, but all of them were loyal and tight-lipped. The police knew something big was happening, but without a digital footprint or a clear chain of command, they were stuck. It felt like trying to chase smoke through a locked room. Every lead vanished just as quickly as it appeared, and the deeper they looked, the more it became clear this wasn't just another gang. This was something far more advanced and far more dangerous. The investigation might have remained stalled if not for a broken CCTV camera outside a seemingly abandoned warehouse in Digbeth. It wasn't much. A flicker in the footage, a brief moment where the video skipped a few frames. Normally, it would have been dismissed as a technical glitch, but one officer, reviewing hours of late-night surveillance, noticed something strange. A delivery van pulled up and stopped for exactly 7 seconds. In that short window, a figure appeared at the back of the van, then was seen again several feet away too quickly for someone to have walked that distance. The officer rewound the footage several times, unsure of what he was seeing. It didn't make sense. The van hadn't even turned off its engine. No goods were unloaded, no words exchanged. And yet the same person, same clothes, same build, seemed to be in two places within seconds. It could have been a mistake in the footage or a camera glitch. But in a case where every detail mattered, it was enough to raise suspicion. The area around the warehouse had been flagged before as low activity but not without interest. A few minor drug arrests had occurred nearby, and there were reports of people seen entering through a side gate late at night. The building itself was registered to a property company that no longer existed. Most officers had written it off as an empty lot, but that 7-second stop changed everything. A request was made to upgrade the camera. Within days, high-definition CCTV with thermal imaging and night vision was installed, quietly, without alerting anyone nearby. This allowed law enforcement to observe not just movements but heat signatures, times of entry, and even the number of people inside the warehouse at any given moment. What they began to see was alarming. Over the next 2 weeks, the same van appeared 3 more times, each time stopping briefly in different locations near the building. Other vehicles followed similar routines, short stops, no visible handovers, and zero communication between drivers. People moved like clockwork, no one lingered, and no patterns repeated themselves. Faces were rarely seen. Many wore masks, not because of any public health requirement, but because anonymity was part of the routine. Officers began mapping movements around the building and noticed the traffic spiked only between 2 and 5 a.m., a window most businesses were inactive and most residents asleep. It was clear this was not random. Something was being coordinated, and the warehouse was no longer just a building in a forgotten part of the city. It was a node, possibly one of many, in a network far larger and more organized than anyone had imagined. As weeks passed and surveillance around the Digbeth warehouse intensified, patterns began to take shape, though they weren't easy to follow. Movements were calculated, timed with precision and never repeated. People came and went, but never in the same group twice. Vehicles used different entry points and rarely returned more than once. Some cars would park blocks away and send a single person on foot, only for that person to be picked up elsewhere by a completely different vehicle. It was like watching pieces move across a chessboard, each one acting alone, but as part of a larger strategy. The team behind Operation Black Glass began building what they called the activity grid. Using CCTV footage, they marked each individual sighting by time and location. The more data they gathered, the more impressive the system appeared. No one loitered, no one used mobile phones, and no one showed any visible signs of anxiety. These weren't reckless criminals looking for quick money. These were trained operatives, some young, some older, who treated their role as a job, not a hustle. Police began noticing consistent timing windows. Most activity occurred in 23-minute bursts, separated by long periods of silence. Then, as if responding to a silent signal, movement would resume. Different faces, different routes, but always the same level of caution. Surveillance analysts observed that runners never used the same street twice in the same week. If a drop occurred near a park bench on a Monday, the next time would be in a completely different postcode. Not even a loose pattern could be established. Teenagers were involved too, but not in the way typical street gangs used them. These teens didn't carry drugs or weapons. Instead, they acted as watchers, positioned at bus stops, outside kebab shops, or walking dogs that weren't theirs. They monitored police movement and signaled when the coast was clear. A glance, a phone call to a fake number, or simply walking away from their post was enough to communicate their message. Most were under 18, all with clean records, making it nearly impossible to detain them for questioning. One girl, no older than 15, was recorded entering a building with a reusable shopping bag and leaving empty-handed exactly 9 minutes later. The footage showed nothing inside the bag, but a separate camera caught the same location receiving 5 different visitors in the following hour. The house was never lit. Curtains were always drawn. The mailbox was empty. It was a dead zone, no digital signals, no calls, no texts, just a steady stream of silent visitors. The deeper the investigators went, the more they realized they weren't chasing individuals. They were observing a machine, silent, precise, and terrifyingly disciplined. The sophistication of the gang's operation forced police to rethink their entire approach. Standard surveillance methods weren't enough. The usual tactics, phone taps, informants, sting operations, had all failed or led nowhere. It became clear they weren't dealing with a typical criminal enterprise. This group operated more like an intelligence agency than a street gang. That realization marked the birth of Operation Black Glass, a secret and highly specialized task force focused entirely on bringing the gang down, layer by layer. Named for the tinted, impenetrable windows of the buildings being used by the gang, the operation began with one goal: see what no one else could. To achieve this, officers brought in advanced CCTV analytics powered by artificial intelligence. Cameras across key districts in Birmingham were upgraded with facial recognition, license plate scanners, motion detection, and even heat signature tracking. But the technology wasn't used in public view. It was hidden in lampposts, rooftops, and even inside unmarked postal vans stationed near drop sites. The software was programmed to detect unusual behaviors: vehicles stopping for less than 10 seconds, people meeting without speaking, or repeat visits to specific locations at odd hours. The AI flagged patterns that humans might miss, such as the same person using 5 different cars in 1 week, or 2 individuals who never walked together but always appeared within 5 minutes of each other. Slowly, a blurry image began to form, one that showed the operation's true size. Investigators now believed the group had over 40 active members, but none were connected by family, phone records, or even social media friendships. Each person operated in isolation, following a precise routine that minimized exposure. Police began identifying the properties being used: seemingly normal homes, usually rented out under false identities. Many were kept spotlessly clean, showing no signs of regular living. Inside, hidden compartments and false walls hinted at the scale of what was being moved. Some houses had no furniture beyond a single chair, a light bulb, and blacked-out windows. In one, officers using audio sensors picked up the faint hum of an industrial-grade cash counter, even though usual overpayment. It wasn't common for small businesses to voluntarily hand over more money than they owed, especially not repeatedly. The flagged company claimed to offer commercial cleaning services to private clients, but no invoices, contracts, or employee records could be found to back it up. Curious, a junior analyst dug deeper and discovered that the business had made several large cash purchases, including a high-end Bentley, all within the past 8 months. The director of the company, a man in his mid-30s with no previous criminal history, had been quietly moving through Birmingham without drawing attention. He dressed modestly, drove an older hatchback for day-to-day errands, and kept a low profile. On paper, he was clean. But surveillance showed something else. Footage from Operation Black Glass placed him at several known drop sites in the early hours of the morning. He was seen carrying black duffel bags into empty buildings and leaving minutes later with nothing. At one location, thermal imaging picked up heat signatures consistent with bulk cash warm from handling, being stored inside thick-lined containers. Police began watching him closely, marking his every movement. What stood out was his routine. He followed a rigid schedule, down to the minute. He never used a smartphone, never took the same route twice in a week, and always parked in public lots far from his destinations. When questioned by tax officials, he remained calm and cooperative, insisting he was just very careful with money. 2 days after that interview, he vanished. His flat was found unlocked. Nothing inside had been packed. but the fridge was emptied, and the SIM card had been removed from his burner phone. Cameras caught the last known sighting of him entering a car at a petrol station outside Wolverhampton. The license plate turned out to be fake. From that point on, he was gone. The disappearance triggered alarms. Police realized they had touched a nerve. Someone within the organization had either warned him or activated a protocol. This wasn't panic, it was procedure. The message was clear. The system had built-in defenses. Anyone who got too close would either shut down operations or disappear entirely. The cleaning company, once flagged for minor anomalies, turned out to be just one spoke in a wheel that ran far deeper, and the man at its center had melted away like smoke. Following the disappearance of the man tied to the fake cleaning company, Operation Black Glass intensified. The team shifted their focus to a location that had been appearing more frequently on surveillance footage, a modest terraced house in Small Heath. There was nothing remarkable about the property at first glance. The paint was faded, the garden overgrown, and the windows always closed, but it had one detail that stood out: a red front door, freshly painted, in stark contrast to the rest of the house. Over a 3-month period, more than 100 individuals were recorded approaching that door. No one ever knocked. Each visitor arrived alone, entered quickly, and exited within 20 minutes. They came at different times: early mornings, late nights, even midday on weekdays. The house never showed signs of life. No lights visible at night, no deliveries, and no trash bins left out. It appeared abandoned to the casual observer, yet activity flowed in and out like a hidden artery. What puzzled investigators was the silence surrounding the property. None of the neighbors complained or even seemed curious. Some were questioned discreetly. Most claimed they had never seen anything, even though the footage proved otherwise. It was as if the whole street had been silenced or was too afraid to speak. Covert cameras were placed nearby. The footage revealed a strict protocol. Visitors arrived, looked both ways, and entered without hesitation. Inside, something was happening, something important, but no sounds, smells, or visible clues ever escaped. Police obtained a silent warrant and planned a covert entry, ensuring no one in the network would be alerted. Inside, the house was cold and spotless. The ground floor had no furniture. The kitchen appliances had been removed. Even the walls looked freshly wiped down, as if scrubbed regularly. At first it appeared empty, but in the back room, hidden behind a false wall, was a disguised elevator shaft. It didn't lead to the upper floors. It went down. In the basement, officers discovered a reinforced steel door and a sealed chamber lined with thick insulation. The air smelled sterile. Inside the chamber was a metal table, a chair, and 2 security cameras wired to a hard drive. But the room had been cleared. No fingerprints, no DNA, no signs of recent occupation beyond a faint heat signature picked up by a sensor. Someone had been there, but not anymore. The equipment inside was high-end and custom installed. Whoever used the space had designed it to leave nothing behind. Not even a trace of dust. It was a command center, briefly used, ruthlessly cleaned, and suddenly abandoned. And the red door, just another symbol carefully chosen to stand out while distracting from what truly mattered, what lay beneath. As the investigation stalled again, the red door house now under watch but empty, a strange pattern reappeared in the surveillance logs. Every week, always on the same night, and precisely at 3:17 a.m., a black cat was seen walking past the house. At first, it seemed irrelevant, a stray wandering through the street, but officers noticed something unsettling. Within 5 minutes of the cat's appearance, a series of visitors would begin to arrive. The pattern was too consistent to ignore. The cat wasn't just a coincidence, it was a trigger. The team captured footage of the animal across multiple locations, not just near the red door. It was seen outside known drop points, appearing just minutes before activity began. Curious, they worked with local animal services to trap the cat humanely and scan it for identification. It had a microchip. The listed owner wasn't in Birmingham but registered in a rural village near Snowdonia, North Wales. The owner's name raised no alarms. An elderly man, retired, with no criminal history, no known associates, and no social media presence. He lived alone in a detached stone cottage, miles from the nearest town. Police initially dismissed the link. How could a man like that be involved in a sophisticated drug operation? But the cat's pattern couldn't be ignored. It had become a symbol within the operation, showing up like clockwork, acting as a silent signal for movement. A small team drove to Wales to investigate the address. The cottage sat at the end of a winding road surrounded by trees and mist. From the outside it looked peaceful, gardening tools by the door, smoke rising from a chimney, nothing unusual. But inside the picture changed. Behind a false wall in the study was a fully operational surveillance room. Multiple screens showed live feeds from Birmingham streets, zoomed-in shots of alleyways, rooftops, even specific license plates. The man had somehow tapped into public CCTV feeds and was monitoring the entire city in real time. Not just watching, but tracking. Dozens of notebooks were stacked on a shelf, each filled with codes, maps and diagrams. Nothing digital. Everything was handwritten. A wall map connected key locations with red thread, drop sites, safe houses, businesses, and vehicles. In a filing cabinet they found receipts for delivery equipment, thermal insulation, and prepaid license plates. Everything was clean, carefully purchased under aliases, never in bulk. Still, the most shocking part was the complete absence of communications, no phone, no internet, no radio. He had controlled a complex urban empire from a quiet cottage in the hills without making a single call. And the cat, just one more tool in a system built on silence. The discovery of the surveillance room in the Welsh cottage raised more questions than answers. How had this elderly man, who seemed so ordinary and isolated, become the linchpin of a powerful drug empire in Birmingham? His meticulous records and quiet presence suggested someone with an intelligence and patience far beyond what anyone had imagined. It was clear he wasn't just a passive observer. He was the mastermind directing the entire operation from hundreds of miles away. Back in Birmingham, Operation Black Glass focused on linking this man to the gang's network. Analysts scoured financial records, trying to trace any transfers or purchases connected to him. They found nothing directly linked to his name. However, a breakthrough came when a delivery van used frequently in the operation was traced back to a shell company registered under a false name, but the paperwork had been signed by someone using the same handwriting style as the notes found in the cottage. Investigators realized the gang's secret leader never appeared on camera because he didn't need to. He operated through layers of trusted lieutenants, invisible strings pulling from afar. Unlike typical gang bosses who flaunted power openly, this man's strength was in remaining unseen. His quiet approach had kept the gang untouchable for years, avoiding the mistakes that had brought down similar groups. The police also uncovered evidence of how the gang maintained discipline and secrecy. Members who asked too many questions disappeared quietly. Suspected informants were dealt with before they could betray the group, yet no bodies were ever found, no violent outbursts in public. It was a reign of control enforced by fear, silence, and precision. With the leader's identity revealed, the police prepared for their final move. It was a delicate operation. One misstep could alert the entire network and send the leader into hiding again. Coordinated raids were planned across Birmingham and beyond, aimed at seizing assets, capturing key members, and dismantling the laundering network. On the night of the raids, officers moved in swiftly and quietly. The gang's usual careful routines were disrupted. Several safe houses were raided and evidence seized. Bank accounts were frozen. But the most surprising moment came when the elderly man was found sitting calmly in his cottage, still monitoring screens as if nothing had changed. He didn't resist arrest. Instead, his expression was unreadable, a mixture of resignation and quiet confidence. His arrest marked the beginning of a long and complex trial. But the city of Birmingham knew one thing for certain: the untouchable had finally been exposed. The trial that followed the arrest of the elderly mastermind captivated Birmingham and beyond. For months, the courtroom was packed with reporters, families of victims, and curious onlookers eager to understand how such a shadowy figure could have operated undetected for so long. The man, calm and composed throughout, did not deny his involvement. Instead, he described his role as a necessary one, a calculated effort to bring order to chaos, to control a dangerous business with precision rather than violence. During the proceedings, prosecutors laid bare the intricate web of the gang's operations, the secret drop houses, the sophisticated laundering schemes, and the silent communication methods that had baffled police for years. Evidence from the hidden surveillance room, the coded notebooks, and the network of shell companies painted a picture of a criminal empire run like a corporation, with the leader as its CEO. Witnesses testified about the fear and silence that gripped neighborhoods, describing how people lived in constant watchfulness, afraid to speak out. But the most shocking revelations came from former members who turned informants. They revealed that the leader had never once met most of his subordinates in person. His instructions came through layers of intermediaries, often written down or passed via trusted couriers. This distance helped shield him from exposure, allowing the gang to operate smoothly even when individual members were arrested or went missing. The trial also uncovered the human cost of the operation. Families torn apart by addiction, young people lured into dangerous roles, and communities left powerless against an enemy they couldn't see. The gang's ruthless efficiency had made Birmingham safer on the surface, but at a hidden cost: fear, silence, and control that ran deeper than anyone had imagined. In the final verdict, the leader was convicted on multiple counts including drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy. The judge described him as a criminal genius who had exploited technology, discipline, and silence to build an empire that had operated under the radar for years. The city breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the impact of the case lingered. Police departments across the country took note of Operation Black Glass as a model for tackling similarly sophisticated criminal networks. Community organizations worked harder to rebuild trust, offering support to those affected. Yet, some questions remained unanswered. How many others like him operated in the shadows? How many more silent empires existed beyond the city's view? Birmingham's story was a warning, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous criminals aren't the loudest, but the quietest.